Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you know, board members, there was a meeting held which involved a variety of public agencies serving the educational area as well as the county itself. There were gathered there members of your board as well as members of the Rowan Cabarrus Community College Board and also the Kannapolis City Schools Board, and then, of course, county staff as well. And in that discussion, there's been a discussion going on about the need for a bond referendum. As Chairman Hsu just pointed out, that referendum does have a limit on it, and the limit is that the county commissioners do not want to impose or rather ask the residents of the county for funds that would in any way raise the tax level at this time. And in that, it sort of caps what we can do and what our expectations are. The difficulty, of course, is that, as we all know, our needs are great. And in light of that, the reason I wanted to put up our school system's needs is because I wanted to point out that minimally asking for 2 or 3 schools and some of these other fairly significant and important capital needs, we quickly could identify sufficient needs to use the entire bond ourselves. And I think that it's important as we move forward on this bond and perhaps bonds in the future to recognize that none of this will be solved with a single stroke. It will take concerted effort over many years to address all of the needs of the school system, not only for the ongoing and what we consider maintenance that has been deferred for many, many years, but simply the growth that is going to occur as anticipated by the ORID study. And so Dave and I have working with Dr. Shepard in his office, have created this list to reflect what we felt were some of the major needs. As you can see from the top down, a couple of energy needs that we spoke to you all earlier on when we were presenting our budget requests for the next year. And the importance of these are that there's an immediate need and an immediate payback for these. So we felt very strongly that we wanted to put these sorts of energy conservation measures to the forefront of the request. And then following close behind, as you will see, are the elementary school, a new facility, a replacement facility for Central Cabarrus High School, and a replacement facility for the Mount Pleasant Middle School. And as you see by the numbers, they are substantial in costs. And frankly, what we're seeing now, even in the small projects that we bid out, is that prices are beginning to rise. And I think that we certainly anticipated that. I recall in the fall of last year, we got a notice because of our contractors sharing it with us, I should say. We are a large consumer of drywall products, and U.S. Gypsum was telling their buyers and people that they supply their materials to expect a 35% increase January 1st. And that was just one of many manufacturers, many raw material processors and manufacturers of finished goods that are sort of stepping in line with that. I wouldn't say they're all going to that degree of increase, but we're seeing readily increases in all of our smaller projects and certainly in some of our larger ones as well. So in light of that, beyond the schools that I just mentioned, we felt our greatest need is in keeping dry roofs over everyone's head. And I know in speaking with the commissioners recently, I was asked by one of the commissioners in terms of the number of roofs that we have leaks. He said, what would you estimate would be the percentage? And I said, well, considering that approximately 50% of our schools are 20 to 25 years old or older, some as old as 75 years of age, I'd say about 50% of the schools or greater are having problems with their roofs. The ones that we've identified here, and I believe there's 6, 7, 8, are all schools that have suffered for years with substantial leaks. We've fought the battle, we fought the good fight, but frankly, we're sort of at our wits' end. We don't have sufficient funds on an annual basis to continue the patching because the patching is getting larger and the severity of the leaks are getting greater. And so we really feel that it's very important to recognize that there are many, many needs, clearly, in all the schools, but roofs and keeping students and staff dry so they can learn in a healthy and dry environment is sort of paramount at the top of the list. And that's how we sort of address those needs. And the remaining projects are all necessary items. If you looked at the entire list that we present each year to you and to the commissioners, as you know, it's several $100 million. And this is simply our attempt at trying to struggle with a list of just a handful of those projects to be used or considered as part of the bond program. And at this point, I wanted to just quickly show you, if I may, for those who were not in attendance, the request documents of the other groups. You can pick any. Cabarrus County would be fine. Cabarrus County has a list, as you see here. Their total is quite large, starting with the county courthouse expansion or relocation and a number of other projects that have certainly, I think, generally good community support, but would have a devastating effect on the amount of money that might need to use up of the bond requirement. So we were happy to be in front of the group and presenting our needs because we want to get our oar in first. In this case, we're looking at, I believe this is Kannapolis City Schools, and they too have an intermediate school, a new one that they would like to build, and followed by a number of modifications to existing schools, and a large number of IT programs, technology programs, and improvements in their schools. And their total was just under $33 million. And the last one is WAN, Cabarrus Community College. And they specifically were sort of focusing on what they felt was item one, as they pointed out on the left-hand side. That was at the South Campus, the Advanced Technology Center building at $12 million. They have other needs, but they talked a great deal about their priority number one as being their most important for that campus. And so that just gives you a very, very quick overview of these needs, many of which can be argued are very important to each of those user groups. And we can only hope that Cabarrus County schools will be able to be recognized, and these are our schools will be recognized above some others, and at least give us a fairly good portion of the $100 million bond referendum. Any questions?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Whitkey, for bringing this report to us. I'd like to give the board opportunity to ask you a few questions in reference to this. Keeping in mind, I don't think these are in any type of a priority list.
No,
they just a number of items that are in a desperate need type thing. However, there is an item on here, but I will give the board plenty of time to ask questions, and we'll start on Mr. Phillips' side.
Okay. So if I understand you right, you're saying that the commissioners are only willing to support a bond that will total $100 million?
That's as we understand it, yes, sir.
And they have proposed spending $108.5 million on county-related projects, leaving us with minus $8.5 million for everything else?
If they were to approve all of their own projects, yes, sir.
Okay. I know you're only the messenger, but I do not understand the logic behind having a bond issue for something that doesn't raise taxes. If we can do this without raising taxes, why do we have a bond issue? It seems to me that there should be two things. There should be a set of projects that are done without raising taxes, and then we go to the public and we say, we got all these other unmet needs. Are you willing to raise your taxes for those? But I'm not a commissioner. Okay, I do have specific questions about our projects. I don't care about everybody else's. They can argue for or against them. But for our projects, the first one that's not yellow is this new elementary school / replace Royal Oaks, $20 million. That to me seems like it needs to be two different schools. You cannot, based on the ORED study, and this ORED study shows red lines where schools are currently overcrowded and whether they will be overcrowded over the next 10 years. And there's only 3 schools on here that are red throughout the next 10 years. It's Cox Mill Elementary, it's Royal Oaks, and it's Odell. Now, over the next, if in 2017 we can have new schools built, at that point Royal Oaks will have 64 more children than it's currently designed for. Cox Mill will have 362 more children than it's designed for, and Odell will have 241 more. Now, if I look at that, I say, wow, the need is clearly Cox Mill and Odell. If we replace Royal Oaks, the only way I can see to make that work is that we move children from Weinkauf into the new Royal Oaks. Then we move children from Boger into the empty spots in Weinkauf. Then we move children from Odell into the empty spots in Boger. And then we move children from Cox Mill into the empty spots of Odell. And that seems like that's a lot of moving. And I would urge you to consider instead building a new elementary school where we know the growth is going to be, and already is, because both of those schools can't handle any more children. We can't put any more modular classrooms at either. And then have a separate project to address the clear need for good facilities at Royal Oaks. So those are my comments.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Mr. Carrison.
Mr. Wiki, I always appreciate the very clear-eyed list of priorities that you bring to us, and you do a marvelous job of keeping us informed about those needs. And these are critical needs. These are dire needs. These are urgent needs. These are important needs, and none of this is fluff. And the rock and the hard place that the Cabarrus County school system always is in, I'm sure all my colleagues up here will agree, and it's common sense in many ways, is that we see these dire, urgent needs, yet we do not have access to the funds. The rock and the hard place the county commissioners are in is in keeping the tax rate at a livable and manageable rate for the residents of the county, yet doing their best to provide not only Cabarrus County, but Kannapolis and the community college system and the county facilities with their needs as well. And that's always quite a challenge, I guess, for everyone involved. My only question, I think, is regarding the line items here for Weinkauf, Ruckey, River, Harrisburg, and Weddington. Are the roof structures of those four facilities so closely identical that the price to replace the roof of those four structures are equivalent? I guess I'm saying, are they all the same square footage? How are the four items each listed here as 1.44 I mean, if they're that close together, if they were cookie cutter facilities, then that's obviously the answer. But I was just wondering how those four figures at four different places could be so close together.
The scope is assumed to be the same.
Sir?
The scope is assumed to be the same for each school.
Okay. And again, I'm very certain that you said it, but the two items at the top would help us reduce the kilowatt per hour energy consumption at the different facilities. Is that essentially the purpose for prioritizing the
second
lighting
item
changes and the energy management upgrades?
The second item is that. The first item, I think, is often misunderstood. We call it, what we're referring to as a lights out initiative. The T12 lamp, the fluorescent lamp called T12, is no longer manufactured. It was outlawed, if you will, or a moratorium was placed on its manufacture by the U.S. federal government. So, and that was last June, I believe, was July, last July. So we're fighting the struggle now. We've bought as many fluorescent, what we call T8 bulbs, to replace the T12s, and we are building a stock of that in our warehouse right now. But we're very, very concerned because you have to do some work in the fixtures themselves. And so it takes time and effort to get all that done. And it takes money, of course. We have some funds that have been put towards that, but the real request is much larger than what we have funded for at the moment. And the sooner someone takes this request seriously, the better, because there are conditions where if, let's say, for whatever reason, we build 4 or 5 schools that are all the same identical age within a year or two of one another, if we had started to have significant numbers of bulbs go out, we would be having a problem. We are beginning to address that now, but I believe everybody is sort of behind the curve in that degree. I mean, like I said, we're stockpiling T8 bulbs as we can buy them, and at a reasonable price, but we still have the work of getting people in the schools to take down the old fixtures, replace the bulbs, et cetera. And so this is really a major and very important initiative that needs to happen.
But it has, per se, it has no, or very little impact on energy savings, per se.
No, actually, the T8 is significantly, it's longer lived, and
Okay.
it actually is a brighter bulb per watt.
Right.
It is much brighter. So there is an energy savings component to it as
Okay,
well.
so the two top rows are related
Yes,
in
yes.
that sense. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Mr. Walter?
This is a group, our board, Kannapolis, met with the county. I would have liked to have seen this list prior to it going to the county. Because again, I'm new, being a new board member, never going through a bond issue, I'm not sure exactly how that works. But it seems here that you've got $300 million worth of projects that are listed on these, that you've showed us today, and only $100 million of that is willing to do a bond referendum on. As Mr. Phillips was pointing out, that doesn't make a lot of sense to do that. And then looking at our list specifically, and again, reference what Mr. Phillips was saying, we have a huge area of growth problem, 6,000 kids coming in here. We have to address that in some way, and we've only got one school that's addressing the growth issue, and the other ones are the replacements. So I have a hard time understanding exactly how that list came together, and then the central issue here. Where are those projects that they talked about earlier on this priority list? Are they on a list somewhere, or where do they stand?
Which projects are you referring to, sir?
The athletic facility needs, the restrooms, the field house, those type of things. They're on a list somewhere, I'm sure.
Yes, they're included in the multi-hundred million dollar budget requests that we have before.
But they're not listed here on this list that we've presented this.
No, in this case, again, we have the significant number. We realized we were far exceeding the entire amount ourselves, but we felt we needed, in addition to the new schools, we had to recognize that there were certainly significant deferred maintenance problems that we had to bring to the county's attention, and hopefully the public's attention as well.
Okay, just standing and looking at this, I mean, we've got listed here $12 million worth of maintenance projects. I don't know if I'd put that on a bond referendum to maintain the facility. This is stuff that we should have been addressing with our commissioners to get these things fixed long ago. Not taking up $12 million on repair items when we have growth that we need to fix somehow and add seats. So I don't quite understand that, how that added up into a list. And we do
Let
have
me interject for you, Mr. Walter, if I may, that may help you better understand that. As I mentioned earlier, in our first part of our discussions, the mode that the board had been in for so many years, as Ms. Minot verified, and this board that's been on a while knows, that we were in the school construction renovation mode, and that's why these projects kept getting deferred, was because of the funding. We were building schools, trying to get kids a seat in the school in a less crowded environment, and then now trying to keep from having to have pots and pans sitting all over the place to keep their heads dry. And when it comes to seats and roofs, that's always ahead of athletics. It's always ahead of everything else. And that's
I
just,
understand
and
that.
that's been the
Again-
problem for all these deferred maintenance items. Am I right, Mr. Wiki?
No, you are. Yes,
But
sir.
again, here we're asking for a bond referendum that's not till next year, till funding is 2 years. I mean, we're talking 4 or 5 years ago. 4 or 5 years, or 3 or 4 years before this stuff ever has funds to repair. But
And
if
until
it's
then,
leaking now, it needs to be addressed now.
Yeah, and until then, though, you just have to cripple along, and what you had planned on doing, you don't get to do now because this took a higher priority. And that's been the story all along.
Well, clearly, there's needs here, and those are just my comments. Thank you.
Yeah. I apologize for interrupting, Mr. Walter, but I just wanted to try to help you better understand and help the newer board members understand, too. That has been the situation that these boards have been in for years. And, you know, I'll get my turn in a minute, but Mr. Kiger, you can go ahead and make your questions and comments, if you
Okay,
will.
thank you. I wanted to give just a brief little bit of background, because what took place at our normally scheduled chair-vice chair meeting, the county had requested, bring your list. You put on it whatever you want to put on it at whatever dollar amount you want, bring it. But by the way, we're going to invite Kannapolis City Schools, and we're going to bring our own list, and we're going to invite RCC. So in case anybody didn't do the math, the total, if you add up all of it, it's $247 million. Well, that's a big number, and there is, you know, we just can't, that's not going to get resolved with the next bond. So that was the purpose of that meeting. This was the list that Mr. Whitkey brought. We could probably debate the merits of each item on here for quite some time. We've talked about lists and capital lists since I took a seat here. I mean, it never goes away, and the numbers just keep getting bigger and bigger. And I struggle with that too, because when I drive home, I'm a taxpayer. I think I pay a lot already. I'm not sure I want to get a notice in the mail that it's going up, but I look at these numbers and know there's a lot of needs out there. The county has their needs, the Kannapolis has theirs. So that was the background of where the list came from and why we have the list from the other groups. The meeting adjourned as, hey, everybody kind of go back to your corner, whittle your list, prioritize your list. We'll get back together. At the end of that, we've got to have 3 commissioners to even agree to put it on the ballot. I mean, the 3 of the 5 have to say, okay, let's take it to the voters. And we'll see. You know, I haven't really had any discussion with any commissioners about it specifically as far as whether they're going to support that or not. I mean, the 2 with that, their chair and vice chair were at the meeting, and they didn't say they weren't going to support it, but you know, that's a whole different scenario. So as far as the list goes, I'm going to look like a absolute total homer here to play into the crowd. But if I look down, the one piece that I would pull out at Mount Pleasant High School, I'd much rather, well, I'll tell you what, let me say this before. I have a service dog that lives with me, and my wife works with disabled children. So when I hear ADA parking that's non-existent and wheelchairs rolling over gravel, my antenna goes up. So if I scroll down to Mount Pleasant High School, and this will not make me any friends out there, and I apologize to anybody at Mount Pleasant, but I'd take cracked and old asphalt over no asphalt any day of the week. So that line item to me could very easily read, let's pave Central Cabarrus wherever this area is that we have ADA parking that's gravel. But that, at this level, that's probably nitpicking your list, and I know you don't want to hear that. So in general, this is our list. We've got to figure out kind of where we are and if we want to prioritize the energy things that we do get a return on investment on are worth doing. We've got growth we have to, I'm not going to say anything that you guys haven't already said. The ORAD told us it's coming. We've got to figure out where we're going to go and how we're going to address that, and we've got to work with the commissioners and figure out an equitable way to do that. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Kiger. Ms. Carpenter?
Oh, you know, I'm going to nitpick. Well, one of the things I agree with Jeff and them, I can't see where we just got one elementary and the Royal Oaks thing. Either it has to be the one elementary and either a replacement or something else with Royal Oaks. It can't be just the ones. I got a problem with that. The other thing with the Central, a whole replacement, we've got Concord, which is a lot older, which we did revamping. I think we got more years left in that. I can't see how you're saying just replace it. You know, we've got schools out there that are a whole lot older than Central is, that we've been putting additions on and been doing everything else, and you're telling me we can't do that? I mean, we just put over $600,000 in windows and doors. I mean, you're saying, okay, we're not going to do anything else. Is that what you're basically telling me? Just with what we've just done? You mean I got to throw those windows and doors out I just put $600,000 on? I mean, is that basically what you're telling me?
What I'm saying, Mr. Carpenter, is that we need to study it. It's a 60-plus-year-old building. I was in a...
I'm 60 years old. Do I get
Yes,
thrown
ma'am.
out the door?
I'm much older
I
than
mean,
that,
I'm sorry. I think I got a few, at least, I hope I got at least 20 more years in me.
I hope so, too. But I think that what you have to do is begin to plan. That's what we're talking about.
Okay,
Something
well,
like
I mean,
this is going to
because
take some
I would
time
like
to
to
do.
see us, because that could lower that, because that's what, I mean, that could, I really think we need to look at that. The Mount Pleasant thing, and that's why I'm thinking, because you're saying replace the middle school, but then you go on down and you're saying you're going to put a replacement roof on it for $330. Well, if I replace the middle, why would I put a replacement roof on the middle if I'm going to replace the middle? I don't have a place to...
You'll notice there's a list of projects, approximately 4 or 5, that are all listed for the middle school. And that was put in there purposely to draw the commissioner's attention to the fact that if we don't have a replacement for the facility, we need to start investing significant amounts of money in that school. It's
Well,
past
that's
the
what,
point
I
of
mean,
waiting.
I see the middle, so I wouldn't have to do, hopefully I wouldn't replace it and then
No,
go
ma'am.
around and put a roof on it.
No, ma'am.
Because I noticed that, I
Yeah.
did see that. So I could take,
Look at the block, it says there, negates all other Mount Pleasant Middle School
Negates all
capital
other
projects.
Mount Pleasant Middle School projects.
well, I couldn't figure, I didn't know what you were talking about negating it. Anyway, but hopefully we would take those out.
Yes, ma'am.
With that, but I would see that we wouldn't do that. And that was my other thing, because again, at Central, I would much rather see the things like bathrooms fixed and gravel put on lots and steel thing, the children not falling through,
The bleachers.
yeah. I've fallen through many of those things, and I've seen those. I would rather see those type things and gravel parking lots before I would like to see AstroTurf. I'm sorry. Those type, safety type things. And I know, did we not just put lights on those fields about 2 years ago on the baseball fields? Did we not?
We have put lights in. I think they're older than that, but
Oh,
yes, we have.
no more than three years at the late.
I'm sure
4?
we've got people here that could answer that.
Okay, answer.
Yes.
4, it couldn't be any more than 4. 4 on the baseball field? It hadn't been long ago. Baseball field, softball field. Y'all had a winning team, I know.
Tim first said 10 years.
Is it, oh, it hadn't been that long. I hadn't been on this board, and I know it's been while I've been on this board, because I know y'all got them. Anyway, and it's been while I've been on this board. But I know, but I would rather see those type things. I mean, in the bathrooms. I mean, the bathroom, have we got those in the plan? Do we have them in there? Are they in the regular maintenance?
I mean, as far as maintenance projects, yes.
We do have them in
Yes, ma'am.
there. So they're not in this, but we've got those in the works?
If you recall, we have a document that's thick that covers a multitude of projects in every school we have. It's $250+ million worth of work that needs to be done. It's not something that, I mean, somebody said, well, why can't you prioritize them? And I said, anybody can prioritize anything. Getting it done is another issue. And
But those are on there then? But, I mean, it just surprises me. We've just heard all these things balled up, and those are safety. And I thought we had a rating. If something was a safety issue, that was bought 0 to 1. Is that not correct? If it's safety, and if somebody's falling through cracks in a bench, to me, that's a safety issue, and that should be a top priority. And if, as Blake just mentioned, handicap trying to go over non-gravel type thing, to me, safety.
Right.
And that should be a top thing before, getting a non-artificial turf. I mean, I know that's important, and that, we want our school, we're trying to upgrade our things, and don't get me wrong. I mean, I like $5 football. I love it. And don't get me wrong. I go to the sporting events, but still I want to make sure our safety issues are addressed, and make sure that we can get that. And I want to make sure those safety issues are addressed first. So that would be one of the things. And then you had the cameras. I thought we had most of those camera issues addressed. They're not. That is this something? Where are those going?
We have approximately, I think we're working on about a dozen schools. We have another 25 plus schools that need camera improvements. It's an ongoing, this is really what isn't recognized here, because we can't show it on this kind of form, is that it's an ongoing cost. This is sort of phase one of many phases. Because and as I explained, when you put a camera system in, it's a 7-year investment. At the end of 7 years, you need to plan for its replacement, because that's electronics and begins to fail or lose its capacity to deal with its problems over that time. It's like your television set. It's like many other electronic, your computers, another good example. Replacement cycles for those are much shorter than for built materials.
Okay, I'll be quiet.
Thank you, Ms. Carpenter.
I'll be quiet now. Okay.
Mr. Shoemaker, you have your questions, concerns. And let me say this while Barry's getting ready. Keep in mind several things. Number one, this is a working list. It's a working list. This is not what we're going to say, this is what we got to have. This is going to be tweaked numerous times. More items, as Mr. Kiger suggested. I agree with what Mr. Kiger said. If we got no paving and we got cracked paving, then obviously we need to get paving. So there needs to be a switch there, in my opinion. And these items are items that are $200,000 or more. The other list that we have is all of the capital needs, and it's excess of $180 million. Actually, if you throw the new schools in there, and since you've got Central on here, which I'll talk about that in a minute, that's going to push that list up to over $250 million. So, but anyway, Mr. Shoemaker, you can carry on.
Yes, and I was actually just reviewing a list that we had earlier this year in our budget that we submitted to the commissioners, just to kind of give them an idea of how much. And just on the projects over $200,000, we were at $243 million worth of projects, not counting the fact that we requested $9 million worth of capital improvements this year just to address some of the immediate needs. And then the projects under $200,000 is running a significant amount as well. So we're well up in the numbers of what's going on. The list that you see is just a facsimile. It's no intent to prioritize anything on that list, but to give them a magnitude, especially when we knew that we couldn't get all of it, but just give them an order of magnitude of these are projects that are out there that have to be addressed, but we could switch those projects out with other projects and ameliorate those needs accordingly. One of the things I think we're faced with is before we can do a prioritization, we have to understand how much the allocation from the bond would be towards us, and then we can begin to look at what realistically can we do with what funding we do get. And so as we await that, as we await the commissioner's decision on how much they want to bond, how much they're going to award, how much of that bond will go towards RCCC's request, towards Kannapolis City Schools' request, towards their request, and then how much do we get? At that point, I think then we can rationally begin to go through a list and say, all right, well, based on all the needs that are floated to the surface, this is what we can really do. Right now, this is just a list, and this is just a discussion about the fact that we have a lot of issues out there. We have a lot of money that's needed to repair our schools, and our maintenance folks are working diligently to do what they can with what they have. But a fact that we have is our maintenance crew has been at we've had the same number of maintenance people since 2008, and we've added almost 5 schools since 2008. So our maintenance people haven't increased with the amount of square footage that's increased, but we're still cobbling together what we're supposed to be doing. At the same time, our maintenance funding has actually decreased over the last 5 years, and it's just, so we're taking care of our schools with less money, and we're falling farther and farther behind the 8 ball as we go. Each year we get farther behind this can that is growing. So we got a lot of needs going into the bucket, but there's very little outflow out of the bucket, and it's overflowing on us. And that's kind of where we are. And the commissioners aren't going to be able to fund all of this because, we're talking $300 million or even $400 million when you start looking at everybody else's requests in addition to what we really need to get going. So there's some real challenges for our system and for our district as we go forward. When we look at energy efficient schools and look at our older schools, one of the things that we've got to consider is usage of energy and how inefficient they are in the utilization and the recurring costs that come down to us. Water, electricity, gas, and how are we using these things, because those costs are not staying stagnant. Those costs are inflating on us on a yearly basis, and we've got to take those into account. So when we start thinking about, do we replace Central, just for an example, you have to really look at the energy consumption that school is doing right now, and in 20 to 40 years from now, what is it going to be doing, and how much will we be devoting just to energy to make that school run, and to operating costs and maintenance costs for the next 20 to 30 years. Those things have to be considered. Dr. Phillips is in the energy business, and he can definitely tell us that the prognosis for energy inflation is at least 5% a year probably for the next 20 to 40 years, and it's not going to go down. Well, 5% a year, if you do the rule of 72, 5% a year is every 16 years it's doubled. So, you start doubling pretty quickly, and then it doubles another 15 years. So in 30 years, you've quadrupled your energy. Okay?
Yes, sir.
So, this is the geometric things that we're dealing with, and the farther we fall behind on maintenance, the more in debt we're going to become just to running our schools. And so, I'll get off my soapbox, but this is even with a $100 million bond, we're not out of the hot water yet.
Mr. Shoemaker, you said it very well. I couldn't have done it better. However, there is light at the end of the tunnel. As Mr. Shoemaker and I have talked, there are other alternatives out there that we could look at. Instead of borrowing money to buy schools and build schools, we could lease schools, because there's companies out there that will build the schools for us. They got all the expense. They go through all of the red tape. They go through all the permitting and all of the whatever we have to do, which is literally just tons and tons of things to get a school started. And they just give us the keys and say, okay, boys, here it is. And in 7 years, if you decide that you want to just buy this school, well, you just buy it. And so that's an option that we have, and that we'd like to get enough interest from the commissioners and the county at some point to entertain those ideas, and instead of laying out $20, $30, $40 million for a school, maybe we would be better off to lease those schools until we get some of these deferred maintenance items out of the way and get some of the things that we have had to let go for years and years because of school construction that we still owe for, that we would be able to try something different, to think out of the box a little different than just build schools and pay for them the traditional way, the way we've always done it. And like I said earlier about schools, we cannot do things the way we've always done it, because if you keep doing the same thing over and over and over and over, what do you get? The same result. And so we've got to think out of the box. We've got to think differently and look at other alternatives to building schools. And as far as this list is concerned, there's some good points brought out by some of the board members, with Ms. Carpenter talking about Central. In my opinion, Central's got a good 20 more years, but in the words of our chairman of the commission, Ms. Poole, she said, Central's a good school, it just needs a lot of love. And I could see that she's right about that. It's a good school structurally. It does need some work. There's no doubt about that. But all of our schools, even the new ones, need work. You look on this list here, J. Robinson, that school's only 12 years old, but look, $2.5 million for a roof replacement. See, that don't quite seem right with me. Why would we have to pay $2.5 million for a school that's only 12 years old with a new roof replacement? To me, that just don't make sense. Something's wrong with what we done back then. And that school was a very expensive school because I was on the board when we opened that school in 2001. And then when you talk about the Mount Pleasant Middle School, it was supposed to open this year. It was supposed to open in August of 2013. But because of the downturn of the economy in 2008, all funding left, and the commission told us there'll not be any more schools for at least 5 years. And so during that 5 years, we didn't build no schools, but the maintenance items just kept building, and the funding actually decreased for maintenance. And so it's pretty easy to see that over the years that we've dug a hole that we're going to have to find a way to get out of it. And funding schools the traditional way is not going to be a viable way of doing this and meet the other maintenance needs that we have. But like I said, and we're going to move on to another item here, but that would be, we're just going to have to think out of the box and look at other alternatives which will free up more money. And as Mr. Shoemaker said, until we know from the county approximately what everybody else is going to end up with, then we can't even begin to put a list together. Why put a $100 million list together when you're only going to get $30 million, which will barely get us to school? So it just don't make sense to do a lot, until we get some direction from the county as to what they're going to do. But Mr. Wiki, I know that this is a thorn in the flesh for you, and I know you constantly list after list, and when they ask for a list, you say which one, and you have to go to a file cabinet to find it because there's been that many. About facilities and school needs and that type thing. But I just wanted you to know I appreciate you and Dave, everything that you try to do to make things better for the schools. And, we're not going to touch all the bases, but we're going to do as many of them as we can and try to hobble right on through here. And maybe before too awful long, we'll see some more light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, it's difficult. There's nothing exciting about maintenance work, and usually you wouldn't see a lot of it on a bond issue, but I think we're at a juncture where we almost don't have a choice.
That's right.
And I can say honestly that if my child or grandchild were in a school that they were continually dealing with leaks, I'd be one of the people voting for this referendum to deal with that, because it isn't glamorous, but it's practical and it has to get done.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to do the best we can to take care of it.
Great.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I did want to make one additional comment in that, in all fairness to this year's budget that the commissioners approved, we had previous to this board and other boards an administrative type. It's not an error. It was a clerical way we were handling some technology that got moved, and then they replaced it with some maintenance funds. That may not be a very good way to explain that, but in fairness to them, they did recognize that something was not right about that, and we've corrected that, and we did not have to use technology funds at the expense of maintenance. They were able to give us some additional maintenance dollars, which we appreciate any dollar that we get.
Oh, absolutely. And I'll tell you, on behalf of the Board of Commissioners, they have done what they could do, because I don't know whether you realize it or not, but the budget for Cabarrus County, I'm sure it's 40%, 42% of the total county budget going to education. And you got all the other auxiliary services, that the county has to provide. And for what they've had, they've been very good to us. I have no complaints. That was $1 million, by the way, Blake.
Yes, that's right.
It was $1 million, and we appreciate the commissioners doing that, seeing that need. But it's a far cry. It's a grain of sand compared to what the needs are. But then again, you work with what you got, you do with what you got, and that's what we've tried to do all along, was work with what we had. We've had needs that were really grave needs, I mean, real bad safety needs. A lot of controversy about the Northwest Gym. We had a situation right there. If we could have spent the money some other way, I would much rather have done it. But when the High School Athletic Association says, hey, you know, you can't hold no more of this, you can't do this, you can't do that until you straighten that problem out, we had a choice to make. So that's what we did. But, I mean, it's easy for me to sit here and justify it, but I think that I can justify what we've done and how we've done it, the way we've done it. And we're going to move forward with what we got. And so, Mr. Wickie, once again, thank you and Dave for all your hard work and all your efforts. And we look forward to seeing this tweaked and getting it down, hopefully working with the county and finding out what they're going to appropriate to us of the $100 million bond, if it's there, that or thereabouts. But we'll just have to just wait and see.
Sounds
Which
good.
is where we stay, wait and see.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you
Board
again.
members.
Thank you. All right, board members, now, that's the end of the reports. However, if you remember in the beginning of the meeting, we moved 5.2, the escrow fund presentation that Ms. Klutz is going to do for us. We moved that over to the reports, so you'll have to click on 5.2, and if whoever's running the screen can put the 5.2 on the screen, and then Ms. Klutz, you're going to do this presentation for us?
Actually, I'm going to introduce this presentation, and then I'm going to let you guys have it.
Okay.
Last fiscal year, I believe it was May of last year, I brought you a budget amendment for $132,000, and it was for escrow funds, and those were returned to us from a particular project. And so we had some discussion, and the board decided to delay that decision on spending those funds. We were bringing that to you today for more discussion. We now know that those funds are not going to be available to us, that will be a decision that the county will make. But I would like to introduce, where is he? Sorry, and I'm very sorry, I've lost your name. I can't introduce someone if I don't know his name. Mr. Bryant, Kevin Bryant.
Most people call me Brian because of the last name, so don't feel
So,
bad. Thank you. I'd like to thank the Board of Education for having us tonight. I know initially this was on the agenda as using that escrow money that was there, and now that's kind of been taken off the table. So when I showed up tonight, I thought I was just going to be here as a spectator. Luckily, I still kind of have my talking points and some of the material. I think I talked to a couple of the members before the meeting, and through that, I'd like to thank Dr. Phillips and Blake and a couple others that I think wanted to hear this presentation. I think it's really worthy for you guys to hear for a couple reasons. The main reason is what I'm presenting tonight is a lot different from a lot of things that are presented to you. The reason for that is, number one, there are real ROI numbers attached to this, return on investment numbers, that most school projects don't have. Secondly, we have community support and collaboration with this project, and that is, I think, very unique to this project. This project, just to give you a little bit of background, initially the turf project was brought to Ms. Reimer as something that could be done at Central Cabarrus to address the equality issues of our facilities. All right, it was brought by Dr. Shepard. I think it was actually put on your budget as around a $700,000 figure. Through that, we started looking at the cost of the turf. That number really is somewhere between 700 and 800. 700 is a pretty low number. And I'm going to come back to that in a moment and tell you how we got to 362,000, because I think that's really a telling number when you look at being able to do a turf field in this economy, and being able to do it for 362,000 is a pretty unique opportunity that not many folks and not many counties or school boards have the opportunity to do. The yearly cost of natural grass, and this is really what I want to drive at. When people say, why look at doing turf? All right, we've got leaky roofs, or we need roofs that need replacement, or elementary schools that need replacement. And people ask, well, how does turf fit into that? Obviously, those things are priority. We have a weight room that I work out in where there is water coming from the ceiling. Okay? That is a huge issue, and it's been going on for a long time. And I don't want to dive into that, but if you're looking at a turf field and you're looking at that leaking roof, and you ask somebody which is priority, they're of course going to say the roof. But then if you look at the turf and the fact that it'll actually save you money over the course of its lifespan, that it has return on investment that will not only get money back into your pockets through tax dollars through the county commission, get money back into the county commission's pockets through tax dollars, also help the Cabarrus Visitors Bureau with occupancy tax and other tax-related issues. Then you start looking at turf as not a luxury item, but as something that really makes sense from a fiscal standpoint. And I don't know that there's a lot of projects that schools have the opportunity to do that can bring money back into the community and pay for itself. And turf has the ability to do that. It's one of the reasons you're seeing it in Mecklenburg County and in other surrounding counties. They're not doing it because they want luxury items. They're doing it because it makes fiscal sense. The yearly cost of natural grass on average is $43,000. That includes field marking, equipment, labor, irrigation, supplies, and materials. Sounds like a high number, but I would like you to consider this. We spend about $7,000 a year on field marking paint. $7,000 a year. We get $5,000 a year from the school board for our maintenance fund. I just put all of that money into field marking paint. When April rolls around and I've got girls soccer, I'll be going back and ordering another $1,000 to $2,000 in field marking paint. So that's an example of cost that you don't think about that's associated with natural grass that is not associated with synthetic turf. All right, or what is commonly called field turf today. The yearly cost of synthetic turf is $2,000. That's basically all irrigation costs. All right, you still have irrigation. Essentially, when the turf gets hot, you water it about once a week. That's all you have to do to it. Generally, you can have 2 irrigation heads that are high pressured, that are able to spit out enough water in about 15, 20 minutes to keep the turf cool, and you're good. And they've made large advancements in that with now having rubber pellets in it versus sand. So that's all you're looking at, and that's a high number. It's $2,000 versus $43,000. I don't have to tell you that's a savings of $41,000 a year. Considering that turf has a lifespan of 20 years, you can do the math and see that you're looking at over $800,000 of savings over the course of synthetic turf. Currently, our natural surface is stressed with 2 to 3 games a week. If we have 3 games a week on our surface and we don't have a band competition or a rec league or anything else, I'm there Monday trying to fight to get my field back in shape for the following week. All right, and it's a losing battle. And I'm going to show you some pictures here shortly that show you just what a losing battle natural surface is and just what a lawsuit it is waiting to happen. Turf field, on the other hand, aside from lightning, you're able to use turf. It can rain, it doesn't damage the turf. You can put youth leagues on it, you can put soccer leagues, you can put lacrosse, which is exploding around this area. You can put band competitions, you can put all these events. I can put my baseball team, my softball team, other baseball teams, softball teams, they can actually practice on that synthetic surface. And I'm going to talk about some partnerships that we've gained through this process that you will see will benefit the community and allow the school system to make some money back on this project. The cost of converting the current CCHS stadium field, the initial estimate was approximately, again, about $800,000, $700,000 to $800,000. You can take out what we're asking for since that's no longer on the table, but we have secured a grant to do the turf field, the first field, and actually they would do a second field probably at the same cost, for $362,000, and it could be less than that. If you've ever looked into synthetic turf, you know that that's the lowest number I think any of us have ever seen. All right, and Mike Applegate is with us tonight from the Cabarrus Visitors Bureau. He's the one that's helped us on working with securing that grant. And we've had meetings. We had one last Tuesday. Dr. Shepard, Mr. Shoemaker, Mr. Kigerwin, along with Tim Lauder, Michael Applegate, and several others, where we talked about how cheap that turf is and then the economic impact and the return on investment that it brings back. There are still some possibilities for funding. All right, when I came in here tonight, my goal was to secure that $132,000, and then I really felt like we could secure the rest of the funding through these other entities. Again, what we were asking the school board for was to start the project and then be able to go other places to get the money for the remainder of the project. Safety concerns, myth or fact? All right, I do want to very quickly just address this. A lot of the initial conversation was around, is AstroTurf still safe? Well, it's no longer AstroTurf. It's no longer the turf on top of concrete like we first thought. I know me and Mr. Kiger talked a lot about this when we first started doing research and looking at what is synthetic turf. And what you'll find is the reason so many colleges, and 94% of colleges, if you include D1, D2, and D3 schools, now have synthetic turf. Well, why is that? It's not just because it costs less. A lot of those D1 budgets have the ability to maintain a natural surface if they thought it was safer. It's because it's actually safer than a natural surface. All right, and you can look at the injuries that have occurred around the NFL. Robert Griffin III was probably the most famous example of that last year, where he was playing on a bad natural surface and as a result tore an ACL. All right, I've got some pictures up here. I think it is pointed the right way. This is the corner of our end zone currently. All right, that is actually where players run through. Can you guys not see that?
Brian, we can't see them. I don't know if somehow you can
Yeah,
get
the
them
lights.
because of the
The
lights and the glare. And I'm sorry, Kevin, for interrupting.
No,
you,
I-
but I just wanted to be able to see the photos.
I appreciate that.
Well,
Can we just pass it on?
yeah, you might just have to pass it down.
The initial plan was to have Brian be our Vanna White tonight, but
He's not near as cute.
so you'll see on the presentation that you have in front of you, it talks a little bit about that, and I'm not going to go into all that detail, but I did want you to have the opportunity on the presentation to go back at a later date and see just why synthetic turf or synthetic surfaces are gaining such momentum. And I think it's pretty obvious that it is much safer than a natural surface. To get back to those pictures, again, that is on our actual playing surface of not just our football field, but our soccer field. So every time we have a football game, every time we have a soccer game, kids are running through that surface. You might say, well, how did it get that bad? Well, number one, the average life of Bermuda grass is about 40 years on a field. Well, if you know anything about Central, we're past that expected life, or that life expectancy. All right, secondly, the cost to top dress a field correctly is about $8,500 a year. You need to do that really on a yearly basis to maintain a natural surface. We don't have the budget to do that, all right? And I think you guys would agree that we'll probably never have the budget to be able to top dress on a yearly basis. Some of the newer schools, Hickory Ridge, for example, when their school was built, they were given a top dresser, or they bought a top dresser with that initial startup fund. So they're able to just go get sand and top dress their field. I don't have a tractor. The 2 mowers we had last year, we had to purchase out of Booster Club funds because we didn't have enough money in our athletic budget to fund those mowers. Our athletic budget is generally $45,000 short of, or the gates that we make are $45,000 short of what our budget is to maintain. The Booster Club last year had to chip in $60,000 to maintain our athletics. So that's why you see that surface that way. The second reason is we didn't have irrigation for almost 2 months this summer. So when you start talking about a natural surface, you're talking about irrigation that goes out. Well, our irrigation is very old. They just had to put a new pump in it. Mr. Wiki would probably know. I think it was around $2,200 is what we were looking at for that new pump when they installed it. A day later, I had a head that was broken. All right, so the head pops up. It's not shooting out. That's $250 every time they have to replace a head. The maintenance guys came out and said, we're looking at having to replace all our heads again. Okay? Last year, several games I had to stop because they said it was unsafe where our sprinkler heads sat on our field. Again, when we talk about safety, it's important to understand athletics has a lot of safety issues, and we're playing on these surfaces like that are unsafe. It becomes a major, major safety issue. Synthetic turf would solve that problem. Lifespan of synthetic fields, as I mentioned, about 20 years is the estimated lifespan of a synthetic turf field at the high school level. That level has a little bit of variation based on what level you're playing at. Obviously, in the NFL, you got 300-pound guys running all the time on your synthetic surface. A little less lifespan than us, where other than our high school football team, youth teams, things like that are not putting a ton of stress on it. Lifespan of natural turf, a lot of people don't realize this, it's limited. If any of you have a house that's 30, 40 years old, my house was built in 1996, I just had to resod my front lawn. Most of you have probably had to do that at some point. We never have the money to resod our football field or our soccer field or any of our fields, because that would cost somewhere in the area of $20,000 to $30,000 every time we had to do that just to get it going, and then you would have to water it pretty much all day long, which our wells cannot maintain. So resodding is not even an option for us with our current irrigation system and our current drainage system, which is another reason you see that issue is our drainage. Environmental issues, I'm not going to go real in-depth to this, you can look into this, but environmentalists will argue that synthetic turf is a lot more environmentally friendly than natural turf is. The reason for that, we're not having to spray chemicals, herbicides, all these things that we have to put to get our Bermuda to grow and to keep our weeds off of our stadium field. You don't have to do that with synthetic fields. All right, you put it down, 20 years later, you rip it up. Obviously, there's some argument about how you dispose of it once you rip it up. But because fields are still in their infancy with this field turf, that really hasn't been addressed. But environmentalists, if you look at almost all the research, are on board with putting synthetic surfaces down in terms of environmental impact. What I really want to touch on very quickly is the ROI, or return on investment. I think any project that is brought in front of the school board or county commission, or in front of any board for that money, or for that matter, that can prove the return on investment holds a lot more value to you, to the county commission, to myself as a taxpayer, than a project that doesn't have return on investment. And luckily, we have case studies that show what the return on investment is for a synthetic surface. And you have one of those right in front of you. I spent a long time, when this process first started about 7 or 8 months ago, on the phone with Russell Allen, who's the city manager of the city of Raleigh. And we talked because Raleigh has kind of become a city that has developed a lot of its tourism around Castle, the local soccer group up there, that has put down 3 synthetic surfaces. And I was privileged that he spent the time he did. We spent literally an hour and a half talking about why this makes sense for Cabarrus County. What we found is that they did a study last year, and these are economic impacts that come directly from the city manager of Raleigh. With 18 natural fields and 3 synthetic fields, those 3 turf fields getting the vast majority of the play, the soccer play, they bring in $9.4 million a year in economic impact, most of that in 5 weeks at the end of November and start of December, which is when we don't use our field anymore. So when we start looking at partnerships, and I'm going to talk about in a moment with FCCA and the CVB and these other groups, you'll see that they can use those fields, and the economic impact that you see here can be felt in Cabarrus County. And maybe go greater. I'm here as an advocate for Central, but this can be something that goes greater than just Central Cabarrus High School. It can affect our entire community, and that's really a key point. In Raleigh last year, 10,355 hotel rooms were rented out per year directly related to those fields. 36,000 overnight visitors per year directly related to those fields. You can imagine how quickly that 9.4 million adds up. It would take a very short period of time for the county to recover their cost of investment if you just look at the cost of natural surface versus synthetic surface. If you add on these return on investment numbers, it doesn't, obviously it takes a year to 2 years to recover that $362,000, if that long. All right, and I think that, I don't want to speak for anybody, but I think when you see some of the entities that are currently collaborating in this, it's hard to believe that this is not a great project, because you have entities including, obviously, with Mr. Kiger, Mr. Shoemaker, Dr. Shepard being involved in these meetings. Cabarrus County Schools has really been a beacon for moving this forward. The Cabarrus County Parks and Recreation, or Healthy Living, we've worked a lot with Londa. We've worked with Mike Downs on this project, talking about it, getting it off the ground. We've worked with FCCA, who has agreed to be a key partner in this. FCCA wants to see this happen. They can bring in the tournaments that will result in this economic impact, and the times that they play do not interfere with the times that our school teams play. So you're not going to have interference there between the two entities. And I think that's really a key point. They use it mostly on Saturday and Sunday when we can't use it. Now, some people might ask, well, why can't they use it now? Again, we go back to the natural surface not being able to take the stress of more than about 2 to 3 games a week. We've also had the Cabarrus Health Alliance. Cabarrus Health Alliance talked to Fred Pilkington at the start of this process, and Fred was gracious enough to get Aaron Bear, who's their grant writer, involved. I think up until this point, Tim, is about $7,500 they put into this project. $8,500 the Cabarrus Health Alliance has already put towards this project, and they've gotten grants and other things to pay for the consulting fees, which is why we're able to show you this master plan that's being passed around now for the Central Cabarrus High School and Flow Park project. So we've had the Cabarrus Health Alliance with Fred Pilkington and Aaron Bear on board there, and then Tim Lauder has done a lot of our consulting for us with W.K. Dixon. So you can see it's not just a Cabarrus County thing. It certainly is not just a Central Cabarrus High School thing. This is something that has gained traction throughout the last 8 or 9 months, to where we have entities like the Health Alliance that you wouldn't even think would have any part of a turf project actually coming out of pocket already to try to get this thing off the ground. And that's one of the reasons that myself, I think, along with our community, is so excited about this project and feels like it really is a need. All right, I know people keep wanting to categorize it as a want or a luxury item, but I think when you look at the fiscal, the dollars that come back from this project, you can understand that sometimes you have to spend a little money to take money. I think most of you being business people understand that. This is a project that requires us to spend a little bit of money, but allows us to make that money back, or allows the county to make that money back. With that said, Mr. Chairman, are there any questions that the board has for myself?
Well, I would like to give the board opportunity, you know, because as we talked about in the beginning, see, I have to apologize, because, see, I didn't know that there was going to be anything other than just a PowerPoint. I thought Ms. Klutz was going to be doing that, and that's why, you know, I felt like we didn't need to do it, because, I mean, I didn't know you were going to be here. I didn't know that our athletic director was going to be here. So, but that being as it is, you know, we've heard the presentation. I'm sure there's questions, but I'm also sure, though, that this board would be in total agreement of doing this. But then again, it's the funding issue, and, you know, we thought we had a little bit of money there that disappeared pretty quick. But we'd like to give the board an opportunity to ask some questions, and so we'll start on Mr. Shoemaker's side if you want to, and you can ask questions. But what I think we need to do, though, is something that I said in the very beginning, and that is when we send the money back, Ms. Klutz, maybe we can attach a letter that this board has endorsed this idea. And I figured that we can get, instead of an action item, we can get a consensus from this board this evening, that this board gives us the nod to say we would like for you to entertain this idea for the reasons that, you know, Kevin, that you have mentioned. And, you know, but I'm still thinking that the commissioners will probably need to see this at some point.
I agree.
They're going to need to see this because they're going to be the one to have to make the decision. But we can hopefully tonight, after we have a brief discussion on this, give the nod so that whenever we send the check, we can send a letter from Dr. Shepard and myself. Dr. Shepard? Yes. You should be.
In my conversation this afternoon, conversation with Mr. Downs, County Manager this afternoon, when he explained to me that the money that we thought we could use for this project would have to be returned to the county, that's not a decision that the county manager made. That's a decision that the bond council, and I guess in Raleigh, made, saying that this money was borrowed in order to pay for a road project at Fur, and it has to return to that project. It has to return to pay down the debt from that project. So my question was, how much in this fiscal year have you set aside already to pay toward the debt for Fur? And can you substitute this money for that project? Can you use the 132 that we're going to return to you to pay the debt you had planned to pay on Fur this year? And then would that free up $132,000 on the county side then for consideration for this project? And he said he would entertain that idea, but he would have to speak with his commissioners about it first. So I'm optimistic that this item is not over, but certainly we don't want to pretend that the county is obligated to do this with this money. So I appreciate the fact that you came tonight, you presented this. I think now the discussion moves to the commissioners and what they might be willing to do for us, and we have one here tonight listening. So I'll get optimistic again if we can get this group organized and get there.
Yeah, one of the good things about this too is, you know, you're looking at a $700,000-800,000 project for not even half that. Exactly. Because of the grant, and then of course the economic impact. All those things come into play. But let's carry on with the rest of the board. And Mr. Walter, you have any questions that you want to bring out? Well, yeah, I'm sorry. That
was a curveball.
Passing the charts and try. Hey, you guys want to try this sometime? It's a lot of fun. Okay, we'll start on Mr. Shoemaker's side.
I was wondering how you figured out which side you were going to start on each time.
Throwing me
you have
these
some kind
curves,
of coin you
but
use?
it's incidentally being in a different environment like this is not the same as being at the education center, and I think the board members will recognize that pretty regularly. But anyway, go ahead, Mr. Shoemaker, and give us your comments on it. Whether you support.
Well, I have a lot of comments and some questions too, because I was fortunate enough that Mr. Kiger and I had an opportunity to meet with you and your team, and you guys have done a really good job of collaborating. Last year or earlier this year, when we came up as a budget item, one of the pushbacks that our budget committee had is there any room for collaboration? Can we start looking at getting all of our county entities working together, the CVB and the county and the school system? Because that's truly you being good stewards of money, being good stewards of what we've got here and creating some kind of a collaborative atmosphere where we can get projects like this on the table, look at what the returns on investment are. In the conversation that you had, you noted a number to me on the number of man-hours that you said that it's required to maintain your field. And it was an astounding number to me. Can you tell me what that number of man-hours is?
We had a couple discussions regarding man-hours. I think the one you were referring to that was shocking was how much time our employees spend on the field, because I remember us kind of having a discussion about that, whether it be athletic director or football coaches or things like that. And one of the things, just for instance, I know we mentioned at the meeting, was to paint a field. Typically, we have to have 4 or 5 guys starting at about 7:30 in the morning. We get done about 3 in the afternoon. Typically, for me to mow a field on a weekly basis, just out of my time, it takes about 2 hours to mow the field once, all right, with the real mowers, which you have to mow with. I have to do that about every other day to every third day. So on a typical week, I'm spending 6 to 7 hours just on a mower out there, and that's before we do any kind of, putting Roundup out or anything like that where we have to maintain fertilizer, things like that. Bobby McGee, who spoke at the start of this presentation, literally probably spends, and I don't want to speak for him, but if you averaged it out over the course of the year, I'll bet you Bobby spends, what do you think, Bobby? How many hours a week? And that's a legitimate number, because there's a lot of times I get there on a Saturday or Sunday. I mean, literally I'm working Saturday, Sundays on these fields because it takes that to maintain them, and Bobby's doing the same. So when you look at volunteers and all of those things, I don't know if we ever put an exact number on it, but I think the number I'd given you is just my number, which is probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 hours a week during this fall season that I'm spending out on the field.
Well, you said 29,000, somewhere in that. There was thousands of hours. Now, 2,000 hours is considered a man year in my world.
Mm-hmm.
And so if it was 29,000 hours, I would literally have 15 man years in that number. Now, are you in 5,000 or 6,000 hours, 3 man years worth of work going into your field? Or, that would be a great number for us to throw back to let people like the commissioners know that that's an opportunity cost that we're losing. We're losing people's value to contribute to the school because they're devoting all their time to mowing grass and putting down fertilizer and doing things that aren't helping any children. Mm-hmm. We're not building the community by doing all that, but we could do a lot better job building community if we were entertaining concession sales and having a transfer of money from the visitors to us to help our community, both in the sales tax, the sales to the booster clubs, and those types of things. You said that the booster club spent $60,000 last year. How many other years have they spent, or what kinds of numbers have they spent during previous years to augment what we're contributing?
Yeah, and I can't speak to years before that because last year was my first year. I will tell you that I think everybody in here, even the people that were part of that booster club, would tell you that before last year, Central had fallen on some very hard times. That's one of the reasons. When I got there, we were borrowing one of the county's mowers because we didn't have a mower that was actually running. So one of the first orders of business we had to do as a booster club, they had to do, was decide, okay, how in the world are we going to get a mower? So we started out with the rotary mower, or a mower that you would ride on just like you'd have at your house that cost about $9,000. Then eventually we got a real mower up and going, which was an old John Deere that was there back when Brian Tyson was there. I think he had bought it used, and then that killed out on us, so we had to buy a new real mower. So I don't have those figures. I want to say, and I could probably get an estimate from Renee or somebody. It was about 18,000 the year before last. Okay, so between 18 and 20 before last year when we were able to get it.
So basically we've thrown away $78,000 into a field over a 2-year period.
Yeah, and not all of that booster club money went directly to that field. So when we talk about $60,000 was spent, not all of that over the course of a year would generally go to that field. Just so happened that last year we had to buy a new rotary mower, a new reel mower. We still don't have, like I said, a tractor or any kind of piece of machinery that we can actually work on our fields with. I generally borrow from Northwest or Hickory Ridge, or call other ADs in the county, which may be a long-term thing that we look at anyway, is having some of these county vehicles. But it just so happened that last year we had to spend that. We spend just in the guy, because most of us as ADs are not licensed to spray, so technically we're not even supposed to be out there spraying. We spend about the exact number is $13.50 a month just to have somebody come out and spray in fertilizer fields.
$1,350 a month?
Yes, sir, $1,350 a month. We just spent, and we pay that at the start of every month. So that gives you an idea of a quantitative number that we pay to an organization, and that is just pure maintenance. That's not him redoing our field, or, we've got some real drainage issues that you can see in those photos, and some of them don't show up in those photos, but Tim, I think, spoke to those at last Tuesday's meeting, so you guys were able to hear a little bit of that discussion. We're going to have to look at putting in new drainage at some point, and that number is going to probably exceed $10,000 just to put the drainage in. Our drainage currently doesn't function at all.
But this project would correct your drainage issues
Yes, sir, it would,
at $362,000.
correct.
So that not only solves the turf issue, but it corrects the drainage on the field. You get your sprinkler system back to the way it needs to be to protect the turf for, overheating.
Correct.
And the only issue you have left is with your visitor side where the stands are too close to the field. Will it correct that issue, or will it move those stands back as a result of having to fix the turf and do the earthwork and all around it?
Our belief is that we would not have to move those stands back. We would be able to actually move the drainage further back. If you look at our home sideline actually has a lot more space than our visitor sideline. The reason for that is partially because that drainage, if we extended our soccer field out, it would actually include where the current drainage covers are. So our soccer field is not even regulation. We have to move those in, and as a result, we have to move, because there's no drainage on the visitor side, we actually move that sideline closer to that fence. So by putting the turf in, it would allow us to center our field and have enough space on both sides. It would also, and I think Tim, would be happy to share some of those things with you as an expert, but it would allow our field to raise up a little bit to where that hill that we currently have that's a safety issue would not be as big of an issue. So we would actually put the surface where the current surface is.
All right. Now, you gave us some numbers from Raleigh, $9.4 million.
Correct.
And that's actually a contribution to the economy.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
And that's through sales tax, room rentals, and expenditures and all. What do we expect, and what were the estimates? Did Michael and his team from the CVB give us an estimate of what they think we would actually experience if we just had this one field, combined with what you're doing over at Frank Lisk and surrounding parks?
Just to give you an idea, and these are some ROI numbers that we currently have in Cabarrus County, and I think Mike would speak to the fact that we're about to lose a lot of these soccer tournaments. Mecklenburg County is putting turf fields all over. If you drive up Highway 73, you'll see on the left they're putting turf fields in. Currently, the soccer relationships generate an estimated over $800,000 in hotel revenues. So if you look at just keeping that, you're at around $800,000 on hotel revenues, resulting in an estimated almost $50,000 in occupancy tax collections. So that's where we're currently at compared to, again, Raleigh, where that figure, if we go back, in Raleigh, instead of making almost $50,000 a year, that economic impact figure they have does not include sales tax.
Okay, so that's not a sales tax.
No, those are hard numbers, and I'm not in that business, but from what I understand, they can't really qualify exactly how much sales tax is generated from a tournament like that.
Mm-hmm.
So sales tax would be an addition, or new hotels or any of those things would be in addition to the hotel occupancy tax that Cabarrus County already has in place. And that's one of the reasons, obviously, the Visitors Bureau is so excited about this project, I think.
Now, we have a new sport here in this county, not a new sport, but it's a new sport for Cabarrus County called lacrosse.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a field eater, from what I understand, especially around the goals. And is part of the FCCA, are they also entertaining working with the Clash to bring lacrosse tournaments here, and that would be an additional source of revenue? And on top of that, you stated in the meeting that Mr. Kiger and Mr. Shepard and I that the band was only able to use the field once per week. This would actually open the field up that you could have band competitions there and not worry about field degradation, and you could bring bands in and have fairly large events, which again would give the Booster Club opportunities for additional sales and things like that to augment their income. Is that
Yes, that's
accurate?
absolutely correct. In terms of the clash, I know that there was initial conversations, I think, that maybe Londa had with one of their members. It didn't really go very far. They're kind of, I think, in a wait-and-see mode. You know, you've got this Frank List project that was kind of on the table, too, that was in the county commission on their agenda last Tuesday. So that was kind of still in the works. But FCCA has come in and said that they very much support this, and they can make sure and secure these tournaments based on the tournaments they already have, and then adding additional tournaments. Our goal would be to solicit the clash, to solicit youth football leagues, to solicit band competitions, to be able to host. I mean, my goal would be able to try to host something every day we can possibly host something on that turf field that doesn't interfere with school, which is really no more than about 2 or 3 nights per week.
All right.
And let me add to that, the advantage of having this field, I'm not sure I'm on, the advantage of having this field in conjunction with Frank List, my understanding is that the bleacher space at Central makes this, if you have a weekend tournament where you're using the multiple fields, then you need a place where you can come together and have the finals event. And I imagine that the interest would be pretty strong if we're setting this up for that kind of tournament to improve all the things that we've heard that we're in a deficit mode tonight. You don't bring people in from out of town and make them do the things you guys were having to talk about. So it creates energy within the community to improve the whole facility. So I think that's why this is something that we need to continue with.
Yeah, and that was something, our goal here is not to compete with the Frank List project, and I think we've always made that clear as we've met with Mike and Londa and some of those folks, is that we're not trying to cherry pick that project away. We're just saying that this project with this current grant at $362,000 not only makes sense for Central Cabarrus High School, but it also makes sense for Cabarrus County taxpayers in terms of the revenue that they're getting back on their investment. And so that kind of speaks to what Dr. Shepard is saying. We're able to host larger scale events because of that infrastructure that's already in place, the lights, the concession stand, the bleachers. And then another key point is by having this turf field, by saving that $41,000 we have a year, I'd be crazy if I thought that nobody has this question going around their head right now of, well, what about the bleachers? What about the bathrooms? What about the fencing? How are we going to fix that? And that is a legitimate question. The answer lies in the difference between that $43,000 of what it costs to maintain a natural surface and the $2,000 of a synthetic surface. So that $1,350 a month, that hard number, I'll be able to spend every month on doing something to my bathrooms or doing something to my fencing. And that last year, the number that we actually used at our school was about I think it was $29,700 was the number that we spent on our field. So weren't able to afford what you really need to spend. I would be able to spend that $29,700 on fixing bathrooms, on fixing fencing, on paving, parts of our stadium that we don't currently have paved. Again, you look at these other items and you say, if those aren't fixed, the turf makes no sense. Those things would be able to be fixed in a very, very short period of time. I mean, within a year of having that $29,000, we could do a lot. So,
well, I see this as a huge boon to our county. It's a win for us because it's not only using the school property for school activities, but at the same time, our whole county would benefit from the use of this property because people from outside this community, you augment the project that they're doing at over at Frank List. So it's not like you're cherry picking away from it, but you're actually providing it something bigger and richer than what it could have had as a standalone. And so, part of the thing is the taxpayers can't use our fields. They're not able to participate on our properties because we tear them up so badly that they're not usable. Now we've created a bigger play space for not only our people but for other people, and bringing in revenue to the county. And you've got collaboration from your health department, you've got collaboration from the Visitors Bureau, you got collaboration from the county parks folks, and I just see this as a win-win. I don't know what the commissioners, what else they would want on the ROI, but I think that you've presented enough numbers there to at least entice thinking about the benefits of this field that would free up money. And that's the big thing, is can you divert the money and use it for other things rather than having these thousands of hours sunk into a field. I'd rather those thousands of hours be sunk into our kids and doing stuff to serve them than to being maintenance a golf course or something like that. So,
And I think, earlier, just to real quick touch on that point, a lot of discussion tonight has been about the complete student, or, having a student have opportunities that keep them from dropping out. Obviously, athletics, I feel, plays a very important role in that. I think my principal feels that. I know neither of us would be where we're at if it weren't for athletics. So, I did want to kind of touch on that as we kind of talk about having more opportunities for athletes. Right. Every hour I'm on a field is an hour I can't spend trying to get an athlete a scholarship or trying to work with him on his SAT or get him registered for clearinghouse or things of that nature that really an athletic director should probably be spending their time on. So.
And I feel your passion, because I coach as a volunteer at Hickory Ridge for swimming, and that's how we keep kids engaged. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll yield.
Thank you, Mr. Shoemaker. Board members, let me ask you this. Basically, all that I need is a consensus. Mr. Shoemaker, obviously you're for it. Do I have any board members that are opposed to doing this? Are there any board members that are opposed to asking the commissioners to do?
Doing the letter or doing the project?
Well, no, to doing the project.
If it's such an advantage, should we not consider, or let's have the commissioners consider, because Michael has been kind enough to get a grant for 2 fields, to consider putting 2 fields onto the presentation. I mean, again, Brian, thank you for the energy and the passion that you bring for this. I think it will make a difference. But if we say we're saving $400,000, is that what we are per field?
Yeah, the cost is $362,000, and that's high end. It could actually be lower than that.
But I mean, it would be just as beneficial to folks in Concord or Mount Pleasant as well. So I'm sure they've got the same issues that you all deal with as well. So.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that all those fields were initially placed with the Flow Central Cabarrus project was for these soccer tournaments, they want a central location. So not saying that, because this is something I think we've talked about with school board members and with Dr. Shepard, is eventually, it really makes sense fiscally to do it at all the schools.
If you can get that price.
Yeah, but in terms of the project, we'd be happy with one field. That would fix our issue. But I think in terms of economic impact, the more you have in one area, the higher that economic impact becomes, or the higher that return on investment becomes.
And you really think the savings that you can generate from here can help fix some of these restroom facilities and parking issues? And that's, to me, sounds pretty expensive to do. If you're going to bring these folks into the community to use this new field, that you'd want to have decent facilities, especially bathrooms or what have you. But parking and ADA access, that's not a cheap thing to fix.
Yeah. And another thing is, just on sponsorship opportunities, I know that that's always kicked around, but currently we are allowed, with board approval and with the superintendent's office approval to sell sponsorships and put up banners, and schools do that. When I can go to a business, and that's a big part of how we got our $60,000 last year was through businesses, when I can go to them and say, instead of 60 or 80,000 people coming into our stadium this year, we're going to have 500,000 people there because there's going to be a soccer tournament there every weekend from people all over the state. Well, now I look at, instead of being able to charge, say, $1,000 for a sponsorship, I might be able to charge $4,000 or $5,000 for a sponsorship. And that's all money that goes directly back into our athletic department through our boosters. So it'll go directly back to fixing bathrooms or fixing fencing or, buying equipment, which we wouldn't need as much of now, or those things. Those sponsorship opportunities are going to, I think, play a huge role in high school athletics very quickly, and it allows us to really expand those opportunities, the amount that we charge for those. So.
Well, I appreciate all the work, and thanks again to Michael for finding that grant for us.
Thank you, Mr. Walter. And I don't want to cut any board members short, by no means. Lord forbid that. But remember, we got 8 more items on our action agenda. And it's already 9:30, and I just don't want us to be redundant over what Mr. Shoemaker's already said and what Mr. Walter's already said and what our presenters have already told us. Now, if you have something that's unclear and you have a specific question, let's get that out of the way. We'll start with Ms. Carpenter, and then let's try to be brief and get this finished, and we'll move on.
Mine is on the safety concern, because this thing has been brought up a while back, and it was on the safety of the actual turf itself, of twisting of ankles and things like that. And that was a real concern. And do you have any data? I mean, because this will not basically come to us, it's going to come to commissioners if we do a letter or whatever. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure they would want to see that data, because that was a concern that had been stressed. So hopefully you've got some data that backs it. This is going to be safe. because that was the concern. I know when it was first presented to me, the first time I heard it, that was the concern they had.
Yes, ma'am, and that was a concern I know Mr. Kiger expressed very openly at the beginning when we started talking. I think it's a legitimate concern when you look at what AstroTurf used to be. The data of athletic publications today strongly support this, and I can get you guys copies of that directly from those publications. Like I said, I think the biggest evidence is how many NFL, how many college teams have gone to synthetic surface, but there's actual real facts on reduced number of head injuries, for instance, showing that the new field turf reduces head injuries dramatically because it actually is softer than a natural surface. Knee injuries are drastically reduced. So, and I'd be happy to get that data too.
Okay, thank
Absolutely.
you. Okay.
I'll be brief. One thing that, just to clarify, the number actually can be a little bit lower because that 362 has some grading in it and some other things, that just because it's a sort of a standard package that we don't think I shouldn't say you don't think you'll have to do at Central. So it actually is a little, you've mentioned that a couple times. I just want to make sure everybody understood. It actually probably is a little bit lower. So we could spend $1 and basically get $3 back, or get $3 worth of stuff for $1. So anyway, that just to clarify. But yet, I'm with you. I think at this point, it's more symbolic of what we're trying to support the project and like to see it to come to fruition. But I'm with the consensus part.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kiger. Mr. Walter, do you have anything else? Okay, Mr. Harrison.
I'll also be brief and prove that I've got a sense of humor at 9:30. I'm reminded of that old rock song from maybe the 70s, I fought the lawn and the lawn won. So I'm convinced that fighting natural turf is a losing battle, and that it does make good sense to pursue this effort. I would take some of your numbers and put them almost in a chart that in approximately 7 or 8 years you would have broken even with the $350,000 at the $40-some thousand that you otherwise would have spent. I'm not quite convinced about the hotel occupancy set of information that you presented, because at your physical location of Central Cabarrus, there are no hotels. So that in terms of a component of your calculation, I'm not sure where that actually would come into fruition, so to speak. But I'm certainly generally in acceptance of the approach that you have, and I'm certainly willing to consent to move this forward, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Mr. Phillips, you have any comments or things you can add?
Well, I'll just say you've turned me from a skeptic to an advocate for this project, so well done. I would just say, as a Stanford grad, I prefer that if you use this presentation again, do not put those gaudy Oregon Duck uniforms in there.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Phillips.
We can probably fix that.
I want to thank the board members for all your input, and thank you for bringing this presentation to us tonight. And what we'll do is by consensus of the board, we'll ask Dr. Shepard to prepare a letter. It is the board's consent that we would like to see this funds or see this project move forward. And Dr. Shepard, you and I can get together on the wording of that letter and hopefully get it out in the next couple of days. And the commissioners, they won't meet again until the 16th. And maybe in that meeting, we can request that they have a presentation, what we've seen tonight, ask them to see this presentation on the turf at Central. Okay.
And
Thanks.
I say, my consensus is if these other safety issues have been addressed. Now, that's the only way you get my consensus. Now, I'm saying it that way. I don't want a kid falling off and getting hurt off of a bleacher if it hadn't been addressed. Now, that's the way I'm saying it. Otherwise, no.
We still got consent.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Thank you for
We
your
still
time.
got consent. All right, what we're going to do, board members, if I don't have any objection, it's been 3.5 hours. Let's take about a 5-minute restroom break, because I see some eyeballs floating all over the room here. So let's get right back here and get right back at it. 5 minutes. Thank you. Once again, thank all of you guys from Central for coming. Appreciate it.
Turn the air conditioning on.
Oh, it's hot.